The marble halls of Capitol Hill shimmered under the midday light, echoing with the quiet rustle of aides, reporters, and the steady click of high heels. Inside the Oversight Committee chamber, rows of black leather chairs faced each other like pieces on a chessboard, each occupied by a figure of power and poise. Congresswoman Nancy Mace, dressed in an ash-gray blazer, reviewed her notes with the precision of a soldier before battle. A former businesswoman and one of the more vocal Republicans, she knew today's hearing on federal spending wouldn't just be procedural, it was political theater. Across the room, Represher Jasmine Crockett leaned back in her chair, chewing the end of her pen. Young, fierce, and unapologetically Democratic, Crockett had a reputation for lighting up hearings with her sharp wit and no-nonsense tone. Neither woman knew their worlds were about to collide in a way that would shake the nation. The gavel struck once. The hearing will come to order. Cameras rolled. Microphones clicked on. The air shifted. Nancy looked up. Jasmine looked back. In that silent second, something charged passed between them. And then, it began. Nancy's voice was calm at first, steady. "Madam Chair, with all due respect, we need accountability. Billions are unaccounted for, and this committee should demand answers." She wasn't speaking to Crockett, yet, but everyone could feel it building. Jasmine shifted in her seat, eyes narrowed. She scribbled something on her notepad, then looked up, unflinching. When her turn came, she didn't hesitate. "With all due respect to my colleague," she said, "it's interesting how loud some folks get about oversight when it's convenient for their narrative." A murmur spread across the room. Nancy's brows lifted. Her lips tightened. She leaned toward her microphone, tone sharper now. "Are you suggesting I'm picking and choosing truth?" "I'm saying truth doesn't fear transparency," Jasmine shot back. The room grew tense. Members stopped shuffling papers. One aide dropped his phone. The chairman's eyes darted between them, unsure whether to intervene. What started as policy was now personal, and everyone could feel it. A storm was gathering, and neither woman was backing down. It was supposed to be a hearing about numbers, but now all eyes were locked on Nancy and Jasmine. Nancy rose slightly from her chair, her voice low and deliberate. "The American people deserve representatives who deal in facts, not feelings." Jasmine's chair creaked as she leaned forward, her gold earrings catching the light. "And they deserve leaders who understand lived experiences are facts." The room crackled with tension. Reporters scribbled faster. A camera zoomed in. Nancy's hand trembled slightly, whether from anger or restraint, no one could tell. Jasmine's jaw was set tight, but her eyes gleamed, not with pride, but passion. Then, a pause. Long. Too long. The chairman finally interjected, "Let's keep this professional." But it was too late. The emotional charge had already spilled into the open. Nancy and Jasmine had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. And what happened next? No one could have predicted. After the hearing recessed for lunch, the buzz didn't die down. It grew louder. In the hallway just outside the chamber, reporters huddled, whispering, glancing at their phones. "Did you see Crockett's face?" one said. "Mace didn't flinch," replied another. Inside a private conference room, Nancy Mace sat alone, her blazer draped over the back of a chair. She stared at her phone screen, scrolling through a flood of reactions. Some praised her. Others called her cruel. She sighed, brushing her blonde hair from her eyes. In a different wing, Jasmine Crockett stood by the tall windows overlooking the Capitol lawn. Her chief of staff handed her water, but she didn't take it. Her jaw clenched. Her voice was soft. "I wasn't just defending myself. I was defending people who look like me. People they think are too loud when we speak up." That hearing wasn't just a clash of policies. It was a collision of worlds, of experiences, of pain. And neither woman had expected to feel this exposed. Back in session, tension settled over the room like fog. A colleague leaned in toward Nancy and whispered, "Careful. The cameras are still hot." She nodded but said nothing. Across the aisle, Jasmine received a similar warning. "They're spinning this already," her aide muttered, showing her tweets on a screen. She looked, then pushed the phone away. The chairman's voice cut through the quiet. "Let's proceed." But it wasn't business as usual. Nancy spoke with a little less sharpness now, measured, controlled. She brought up statistics, misused funds, citing facts without heat. Jasmine responded with clarity, but also with something else, restraint. She chose her words like walking a wire. For the first time, they weren't interrupting each other. Something had shifted, not forgiveness, not peace, but awareness. Behind the practiced smiles, the two women had started seeing each other, not just as opponents, but as people carrying different battles into the same ring. And though the room had quieted, the story was far from over. As the hearing neared its end, an unexpected silence hovered. For a moment, the chairman paused his notes. A gentle hush settled over the chamber. The confrontation hadn't exploded again, but something hung unspoken between them. Nancy glanced up from her notes. Jasmine was already watching her, their eyes locked, not with anger, but with something closer to understanding. Neither smiled, neither nodded, but in that quiet exchange the temperature changed. Then a door opened at the back. Media was already swarming outside. The chairman gavelled the session closed and chairs began to scrape the floor. As they gathered their belongings, Nancy hesitated. So did Jasmine. And just before they turned to leave, Nancy stepped forward. Jasmine didn't back away. But what she said next, low and almost reluctant, would change everything. "Congresswoman, there's more to this than either of us said." Jasmine didn't respond. Not yet. But her eyes widened, just slightly. The next chapter wouldn't happen in front of cameras. It would be personal, and far more powerful. Later that evening, under the dim glow of the Capitol dome, a black SUV waited quietly at the side entrance. Jasmine Crockett stepped in alone. Inside sat someone she didn't expect. Nancy Mace. No staff, no cameras. Just two lawmakers from opposite sides of the aisle, bound by one unforgettable clash. Neither spoke for a moment. "You wanted to talk?" Jasmine asked, arms crossed. Nancy nodded, her voice lower than usual. "That hearing, I lost control, but something you said stuck with me." Jasmine raised an eyebrow, cautious. "Which part?" "The part where you said some of us think you're too loud when you speak up." There was no sarcasm, no deflection, just reflection. "I've been loud too," Nancy said, "but I never wondered what it cost you." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was honest. Jasmine slowly sat down. It was the beginning of a conversation that could never happen in front of the press. Not yet. The Capitol coffee shop was nearly empty the next morning when Nancy and Jasmine met again. Hoodies replacing blazers, coffee replacing microphones. For the first time, they shared more than stats or sound bites. Jasmine spoke of her childhood in Dallas, of marching with her mother for justice, of courtroom battles where she was dismissed before she spoke. Nancy talked about growing up in a conservative military family, the pressure to follow rules, and the guilt of speaking out when those rules didn't make sense. Their differences were real. So were their scars. "I guess we both learned how to fight," Jasmine said, staring into her cup. Nancy smirked. "Yeah, and how not to back down." A beat passed. Then Jasmine added, "But maybe we're both still learning when to fight." That line lingered. There were no TV lights here, just two women daring to be human in a city that rewards armor. That afternoon, Jasmine sat alone in her office, staring at her desk. On top sat a handwritten note, one she'd drafted, rewritten, and nearly trashed twice. It was addressed to Nancy Mace. It didn't apologize, but it did acknowledge. It was raw, honest. "I still disagree with most of what you said, but I finally understand why you said it." Across the building, Nancy was finishing her own. "I didn't hear you before. Not really, but I'm listening now." Neither note was meant for public view. Not yet. But both women were beginning to realize that the real fight, the one that mattered, wasn't just across the aisle. It was inside them, and it had only just begun. What could come from this unexpected connection, reconciliation, rebellion, or something the nation's never seen? Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and don't miss what happens next in this story that's rewriting the rules on Capitol Hill. The next day, Jasmine found herself walking a tightrope. Back in Dallas, her supporters flooded her phone with praise, fiery memes, hashtags, and cheers for how she put Mace in her place. But behind closed doors, mentors and senior party members had a different tone. "Don't get pulled into the drama," warned one senator. "You're bigger than the moment," said another. Jasmine stared at her phone, exhausted. The same video clip played on loop. Her glare, Mace's tone, the gavel slamming. But none of them saw the late-night meeting. None of them read the letters. That moment, loud and public, had created something oddly quiet and private. And the question that haunted her now was, what if there's something bigger here than just proving a point? Meanwhile, Mace was under pressure too. Calls from donors, emails from party leaders. What were you thinking, meeting with her? Her answer was simple. Because I needed to understand. Late that night, Jasmine opened her inbox and froze. Subject, something bigger. From, Nancy Mace attached was a single page, a draft. It was a joint resolution, symbolic, non-binding, and completely out of the blue. It called for increased dialogue between young lawmakers from opposing parties. A civic bridge, as Nancy titled it. No names were mentioned, no press releases attached. It wasn't about winning, it was about trying. Jasmine reread it twice. Then she picked up her phone and called her mother. "Ma, do you think it's possible to work with someone you've spent your career opposing?" Her mother's voice came calm and clear. "If she's showing you her heart instead of her hand, yes. The Capitol might not be ready, but maybe, just maybe, they were." The next morning, as Capitol Hill buzzed with gossip and gridlock, Jasmine and Nancy met once again, this time in a side room tucked behind the main hearing chambers. No cameras, no aides. Jasmine slid the draft back across the table, now with a few scribbled changes. "I added community input requirements and made sure it includes public school forms." Nancy nodded. "I figured you would." They shook hands, not as rivals, not as lawmakers, but as people trying to bend something broken. Their touch lingered for just a second full of history, of conflict, and of possibility. Then the door creaked open. A staffer peeked in. "They're ready for you, Congresswomen." They stood side by side. Whatever came next, support, backlash, mockery, it didn't matter. They were ready. Could this fragile alliance survive the harsh spotlight of Washington? Or would politics crush it before it could breathe? If you're feeling the weight of their decision, show your support. Hit that like button, subscribe for what's next, and let's explore how one surprising encounter could rewrite everything. By mid-morning, the bridge they had carefully built was already under siege. An anonymous leak made its way to a major news outlet. Mace and Crockett drafting bipartisan pact. Within hours, talking heads on both sides exploded. "She's selling out," a conservative radio host barked. "She's getting played," an MSNBC panelist warned. Nancy scrolled through the headlines, her coffee untouched. "So, this is what it feels like to do the right thing," she whispered to herself. Jasmine wasn't faring better. Her district office in Dallas received angry calls. Former allies questioned her. Even her campaign manager texted, "Are we going off script?" She sighed and replied, "No, we're just writing a new one." In a rare private text, Nancy sent her a single sentence. "Let them talk. Our actions will speak louder." But they both knew. The storm had only just begun. Nancy flew back to Charleston for a weekend fundraiser, expecting tension, but not betrayal. In the hall of a historic church, she was met with side eyes and forced smiles. A longtime supporter pulled her aside. You're not softening, are you? Nancy met her gaze. I'm standing where I always have, on principle, even if that means listening across the aisle. Her words were met with a pause, then a slow nod, but not everyone clapped. Meanwhile, in Texas, Jasmine faced protesters outside a community forum. One young woman shouted, "Why would you partner with someone who mocks our values?" Jasmine walked up to her calmly. Because healing doesn't start with silence, it starts with listening. The woman didn't respond, but her glare softened. Hearts weren't changing overnight, but something was shifting. When Jasmine and Nancy returned to Washington the following Monday, the air felt thicker. Their names were now linked in whispers through marble hallways. Some Democrats refused to sit near Jasmine. A few Republicans turned their backs on Nancy in elevators. Yet when the hearing resumed, the two women entered the chamber at the same time. Unplanned, uncoordinated, but somehow together. Gasps swept the room. Nancy leaned in and whispered, "We can still back out." Jasmine looked ahead and answered, "That's not why we started this." As they took their seats, a reporter tweeted a photo. "Mace and Crockett, something's brewing." And from the gallery, a young congressional intern watched, wide-eyed, feeling something rare, hope. But just as the gavel came down, a staffer rushed in with a sealed envelope for Jasmine. Her eyes scanned it, and her breath caught. Whatever was inside could change everything. What secret did the envelope contain, and could it destroy the fragile trust they just built? Don't miss what happens next. If this story has moved you, tap that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts below. This is only just beginning. Cameras panned slowly across the room as Jasmine Crockett took a deep breath, gripping the folded document in her hand. The chamber, once filled with hostility, now hung in the stillness of anticipation. The letter was more than evidence. It was betrayal, written in plain ink, from someone within her own caucus. Jasmine's voice, when it came, was clear and unwavering. This hearing was never supposed to be personal, but politics made it so. This document, circulated behind closed doors, attaches my name to claims I never made and ideas I never endorsed. The room stirred. Even veteran lawmakers leaned forward in their chairs. Nancy Mace, seated just feet away, exchanged a long glance with Jasmine, and then, something no one expected, Nancy stood beside her. "I may disagree with Reppers Crockett on almost everything," Nancy began, "but I won't stand for sabotage. Not from her side, not from mine." The room erupted in whispers. The hearing, once spiraling with division, had taken a sharp, emotional turn. Outside the chamber, the press swarmed. Inside, Jasmine and Nancy sat in a small, closed-door committee room. No cameras, no microphones. Just silence, until Jasmine broke it. "Why'd you do that?" she asked. Nancy didn't hesitate. "Because for once, I saw a moment where truth mattered more than tribal lines, and you didn't deserve that hit." Jasmine exhaled, almost a laugh, but it was heavy. "We're not friends, Nancy." "No," Mace replied, "but maybe we're not enemies either." They stared at each other, the weight of the moment pressing in. Two women, shaped by different worlds, burned by the same fire, public life. That night, C-SPAN reran the hearing. Across the country, people watched not just a clash of words, but a flicker of change. It wasn't just political theater anymore. It was personal, and it made people think. What if Congress didn't need to be a battlefield? The next morning, headlines across America echoed the same sentiment: a stand for integrity. On talk shows, pundits scrambled to make sense of the alliance. Some called it posturing. Others called it growth. But one thing was clear: the moment had struck a nerve. Back in Charleston, Nancy received a handwritten letter from a retired black schoolteacher. It read, "I never thought I'd say this, but today you made me proud. You listened. Thank you." In Dallas, Jasmine's niece texted her, "Auntie, my civics teacher played your speech today. The whole class clapped." Real change didn't erupt in applause. It unfolded slowly in quiet living rooms, whispered prayers, and reconsidered beliefs. Back on Capitol Hill, Jasmine and Nancy crossed paths in the hallway. No cameras, just a nod, a knowing smile. Sometimes the most powerful moments aren't what we argue, but what we stand for together. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more unforgettable true-to-life stories. And drop a comment below. Could this kind of courage change politics for good? Thank you for watching.